the smell of your grandmother's apple pie cooling on the windowsill, the first spoonful of your mother's chicken soup when you're feeling sick, that special pasta sauce recipe your Italian neighbor taught you that reminds you of summer evenings on the porch. We all have those dishes that transport us back in time with just one bite. Today we're exploring how these precious heirloom recipes do more than feed our bodies. They keep our family memories alive for generations. And wait until you hear about the 100-year-old Depression-era cake recipe that saved one family during their darkest hour. That story coming up in just a few minutes. Depression-era chocolate mayonnaise cake. Picture a kitchen in 1932, bare cupboards during the darkest days of the Great Depression. A young mother stands mixing a cake without eggs or butter, luxuries her family can't afford. Instead, she reaches for a surprising ingredient, mayonnaise. The chocolate mayonnaise cake was born out of necessity when families had to stretch every penny. The Mayo, made with oil and eggs, replaced these scarce ingredients perfectly. One bite of this incredibly moist, rich chocolate cake, and you'd never guess its humble origins. For Dorothy Henderson of Ohio, now 92, this cake represents her mother's ingenuity during difficult times. Mom would save pennies for weeks just to buy cocoa powder. She told researchers from the Smithsonian Food History Project, that cake meant we were going to be okay. Today, 4 generations of Hendersons still bake this cake for every family celebration. What other Depression-era recipes survived? Stay tuned. The next one sustained entire communities during the hardest times. Hoover Stew. As bread lines stretched around city blocks in 1930s America, an unlikely hero emerged from community soup kitchens. Hoover Stew, named sarcastically after President Herbert Hoover, this hearty mixture combined hot dogs, macaroni, canned corn, and stewed tomatoes into a filling meal that could feed dozens for pennies. In Chicago's South Side, Mrs. Abigail Winters served this stew 3 times weekly at her community kitchen. The simple ingredients created a surprisingly comforting flavor, slightly sweet from the corn, tangy from the tomatoes, with the satisfying chew of pasta and protein from the hot dogs. For many children of the era, now grandparents in their 80s and 90s, this humble stew represents community resilience. As one survivor told the Depression-era Food History Project, that stew meant someone cared if we ate that day. Modern families have rediscovered this recipe, often adding their own twists while teaching children about American history through their spoons. What other historical moments shaped our treasured family recipes? The next dish survived a journey across oceans to become an American classic. Italian Sunday gravy, the tenement apartments of New York's Lower East Side, early 1900s. Inside, an Italian immigrant mother tends a pot of slowly simmering tomato sauce filled with meatballs, sausage, and sometimes braciole. The rich aroma of garlic and basil fills the narrow hallways, a weekly ritual that transformed cramped quarters into a place that felt like home. Sunday gravy isn't just sauce, it's liquid history, simmered for hours. This deep red elixir carries the essence of the old country in each spoonful. The distinctive sweet tart flavor balanced with meaty richness became the centerpiece of family gatherings for millions of Italian-American families. Frank Sinatra famously said his mother's Sunday gravy was the thread that kept our family connected through the hardest times. The National Italian-American Foundation has documented hundreds of variations, each family insisting theirs is the authentic recipe. Today, grandchildren of those immigrants still gather around Sunday tables for this ritual meal, the recipe evolving yet somehow staying true to its roots. And speaking of roots, the next heirloom dish connects directly to America's heartland and the pioneering women who fed a growing nation. Amish friendship bread, a small jar of bubbly sourdough starter, passed neighbor to neighbor across Amish country since the 1860s, each recipient feeding the living culture with sugar, flour and milk for 10 days before dividing it to share, along with a fresh baked cinnamon sweet loaf as demonstration. Friendship bread embodies community in edible form. The tangy sweet, cinnamon-laced bread with its tender crumb carries the distinct flavor of heritage. The Amish believed sharing starter created literal bonds between households. You couldn't make the bread without someone else's generosity. Ruth Miller from Lancaster County has tracked her family's starter back 7 generations. My great-great-grandmother brought this starter in a covered wagon from Ohio, she told the American Folklife Center. During hard winters, this bread was sometimes all they had. The National Sourdough Library has documented over 120 distinct Amish friendship bread variations across America's heartland. As you taste that distinctive sweet-tangy combination, you're connecting with a uniquely American tradition of neighborly care. But what about the recipes that survived even longer journeys? The next dish traveled from Africa to become a cornerstone of American cuisine, soul food collard greens. Imagine fields in the American South, where enslaved people cultivated small garden patches after grueling plantation work. Among their precious vegetables, collard greens, a hearty leafy plant that could withstand harsh conditions. These greens, slowly simmered with a ham hock or salt pork, became a symbol of resilience and ingenuity. The distinctive earthy, slightly bitter flavor of collards transforms during long, slow cooking with smoky pork. The resulting potent pot liquor, that nutritious broth, was so valued that families would drink it like medicine during winter months. Vertemay Smart-Grosvenor, celebrated culinary anthropologist, once explained, "These greens carried our ancestors' spirits through Middle Passage and slavery. When you taste true collards, you taste survival." According to the Southern Foodways Alliance, over 82% of African American families surveyed still prepare collard greens using techniques passed down at least 3 generations. The next dish similarly preserved cultural heritage against impossible odds, becoming a symbol of celebration and resilience. Jewish brisket, a modest cut of beef, transformed through hours of slow cooking into a centerpiece worthy of Sabbath tables and holiday celebrations. Jewish brisket emerged as a cornerstone of Ashkenazi cuisine because this tough, inexpensive cut could be stretched to feed large families when resources were scarce. The distinctive sweet-sour flavor profile, often featuring tomatoes, onions, and sometimes a touch of brown sugar, developed as Jewish families moved from Eastern Europe to American cities. That perfect fork-tender texture, where the meat practically melts at the touch, represents generations of maternal wisdom. Marty Rappaport, third-generation Jewish deli owner, explained to the Jewish Food Society that brisket recipes were valuable currency between mothers-in-law and new brides. The exchange of these recipes literally joined families together. A recent survey by the National Jewish Food Council found brisket remains the most commonly prepared holiday dish among American Jewish families, with 87% reporting they use recipes at least 50 years old. But can recipes predating America itself still resonate today? The next dish has been nourishing families for over 400 years on American soil. Native American Three Sisters stew. Long before European settlers arrived, indigenous communities across North America cultivated 3 crops together: corn, beans, and squash. These 3 sisters supported each other in the field, corn providing stalks for beans to climb, beans fixing nitrogen in the soil, and squash leaves shading out weeds. Combined in a hearty stew, these ingredients create perfect nutrition and distinctive sweet, earthy flavor. The Iroquois nation has prepared variations of this dish for centuries, the subtle sweetness of corn balancing the earthiness of beans, all enriched by the smooth texture of squash. Lois Ellen Frank, Native American chef and food historian, told the Smithsonian, "These recipes weren't just food. They were agricultural wisdom, cultural knowledge, and spiritual practice combined." Modern nutritional analysis shows Three Sisters stew provides complete protein, complex carbohydrates, and vital micronutrients, perfectly balanced sustenance. Nearly 65% of tribal elders surveyed by the Indigenous Food Systems Network report teaching younger generations these traditional recipes as cultural preservation. How do other cultures preserve their heritage through cherished recipes? The next dish survived exile and migration to remain a powerful symbol of home. Cuban Ropa Vieja, the kitchens of 1960s Miami, where Cuban exile families recreated the taste of their homeland through a remarkable alchemy of shredded beef in vibrant tomato sauce. Ropa Vieja, literally old clothes, transforms tough flank steak into silky shreds that absorb the flavors of peppers, olives, and spices. The distinctive tang of this dish, slightly sweet, slightly acidic, with the unexpected brininess of olives, represents survival and memory. Each bite delivers the complex history of Cuban culinary tradition, with Spanish influences meeting Caribbean ingredients. Maria Gonzalez, who fled Cuba in 1961, told the Cuban Heritage Collection, "Making this dish in Miami was an act of resistance. The familiar taste reminded us that our culture couldn't be taken away." A University of Miami study found that 91% of Cuban-American grandparents consider teaching family recipes essential for maintaining cultural identity. Ropa Vieja was named Cuba's national dish in 2015, yet ironically is now most frequently prepared on American soil. What other recipes serve as cultural time capsules? The next dish survived one of history's greatest tragedies to become a symbol of remembrance. Irish soda bread, 1 minute, a simple brown round loaf with a cross cut deep into its top, baked in cottages across Ireland during the devastating potato famine of the 1840s. Soda bread emerged because it required no expensive yeast, using baking soda as leavening with just flour, buttermilk and salt. The distinctive dense, moist crumb and slight buttermilk tang carries the memory of survival. The cross cut into the top, practical for even baking, took on spiritual significance, with families saying it was to let the fairies out or to bless the bread. Kathleen O'Sullivan, whose ancestors emigrated from County Cork during the famine, told the Irish-American Cultural Institute, "Our family's soda bread recipe was literally the only thing they brought to America. Not even a photograph survived the journey." The Society for the Preservation of Irish-American Culinary Heritage has documented regional variations, Ulster versions with caraway seeds, Cork style with dried fruit, and variations that echo the resources available in different counties. When those Irish immigrants arrived in America, they encountered another culture that elevated bread making to an art form. Our next recipe created bonds between neighbors in early American settlements. Appalachian stack cake. Picture a wedding in the Appalachian Mountains, 1880s. Instead of one elaborate cake, neighbor families each bring a thin layer of spiced cake, stacked together with dried apple filling between each layer. The creation is left to sit for days, allowing the moisture from the fruit to soften the whole structure. The distinctive spicy sweet flavor of this humble masterpiece, with notes of sorghum, ginger, and dried apples, represents community cooperation. The more layers, the more popular the bride, with some cakes reaching towering heights of up to 12 layers. 86-year-old Dolly Parton shared her family's 7-generation stack cake recipe with the Smithsonian, noting, "This cake tells you everything about mountain life. Making something grand from simple ingredients, neighbors helping each other, and patience in waiting for goodness." According to the Appalachian Food Heritage Project, stack cake remains the most requested recipe in their archives, with modern families still gathering to create these collaborative desserts for special occasions. How did other immigrant communities preserve their food heritage? Our next dish followed a remarkable journey across oceans and generations: Chinese paper-wrapped chicken. San Francisco, 1849. Chinese immigrants arriving during the gold rush wrapped marinated chicken in paper packages for cooking, a technique that preserved precious moisture and allowed miners to carry lunch into the fields. The paper would absorb the juices, creating an intensely flavored parcel that could be eaten directly from its wrapper. The aromatic blend of soy, ginger, and garlic created a distinctive flavor profile that traveled from Guangdong province to become part of California's culinary landscape. The surprising tenderness of the chicken, infused with its marinade, became a taste of home for displaced workers. Grace Young, Chinese-American culinary historian, documented elderly community members who recalled their grandparents preparing these packets for railroad workers. This single dish connects directly to the Chinese-American experience of building the transcontinental railroad, she told the Chinese Historical Society of America. Today, variations of paper-wrapped chicken appear in Chinese-American family gatherings and restaurants, continuing a tradition that survived anti-Chinese legislation, discrimination, and cultural assimilation. Speaking of survival, our next recipe demonstrates how immigrant women turned kitchen scraps into beloved comfort food. 12. Polish pierogi. In the coal mining towns of Pennsylvania during the early 1900s, Polish immigrant women gathered in church basements to prepare hundreds of pierogi, delicate half-moon dumplings filled with potato, cheese, or sauerkraut. These communal cooking sessions, called pierogi pinching parties, created enough food to feed extended families for weeks. The distinctive chewy tender dough enveloping creamy potato filling creates an unmistakable comfort food experience. Often served with caramelized onions and sour cream, these humble dumplings transformed kitchen scraps into celebration food. Helena Wojcik, whose grandmother immigrated to Pittsburgh in 1912, told researchers from the Heinz History Center, during the mine strikes, these pierogi kept families alive. Women would make hundreds using just a few potatoes and whatever flour they could afford. A survey by the Polish-American Historical Association found pierogi making remains a vital cultural practice, with 76% of respondents reporting they learned the technique directly from grandparents. How did other everyday ingredients become extraordinary through necessity? Our next recipe shows how immigrant ingenuity created an enduring symbol of cultural resilience. 13. Mexican pozole. Ancient Aztec ceremonial halls to modern family Sunday gatherings, pozole spans thousands of years of Mexican history. This hearty hominy stew with pork or chicken represents one of North America's oldest continuously prepared dishes, with each region developing distinctive variations. The remarkable transformation of field corn through nixtamalization creates hominy with its distinctive chewy texture and earthy flavor, combined with rich broth and tender meat. Then topped with fresh radishes, cabbage, and lime, pozole delivers a perfect balance of comfort and freshness. Margarita Carrillo Arante, Mexican culinary ambassador, explained to the Smithsonian, pozole contains Mexico's history in one pot, indigenous corn techniques meeting Spanish-introduced pork, creating something entirely new that has sustained families through centuries. Research from the University of Texas found pozole remains among the most commonly prepared Mexican-American family celebration dishes, with 82% of families surveyed reporting they use recipes predating their immigration to the United States. What other ancient techniques survived modern migration? Our next dish traveled from the Mediterranean to become an American baking tradition. 14. Greek baklava. Imagine paper-thin sheets of phyllo dough, painstakingly layered with honeyed nuts by Greek grandmothers in the church kitchens of 1920s Chicago and Detroit. These communities recreated the elaborate pastry despite ingredient shortages and different ovens, insisting this labor-intensive recipe remain part of their American experience. The distinctive textural contrast of crisp, flaky layers giving way to sticky, nutty filling creates an unforgettable sensory experience. The aromatic flavor profile, cinnamon, cloves and honey syrup infused with lemon, carries cultural memory in each bite. Dr. Elena Paravantes, Mediterranean diet researcher, found that 94% of Greek-American families consider baklava essential for maintaining cultural traditions. The recipe often indicates which region of Greece a family originated from, walnut versions from the north, pistachio from islands closer to Turkey, she told the National Hellenic Society. Today, many Greek festivals across America feature grandmothers teaching younger generations the art of stretching phyllo and assembling this complex dessert, ensuring techniques dating back centuries survive in modern kitchens. How did other European baking traditions evolve on American soil? Our next recipe shows how humble ingredients created enduring family bonds. 15. Swedish cardamom bread. Minnesota farmhouses, late 1800s, Swedish immigrant women warming kitchens with the distinctive scent of cardamom bread, braided loaves infused with the exotic spice carried carefully from the old country. These aromatic breads, often served during dark northern winters, brought light and comfort to hard-working families. The distinctive warm, slightly citrusy flavor of cardamom creates an unmistakable sensory experience. The bread's tender interior with a satisfying crust represents generations of baking wisdom passed mother to daughter. Ingrid Larson, whose great-grandmother homesteaded in Minnesota in 1872, shared her family's recipe with the American Swedish Institute, noting, "My great-grandmother insisted on using real cardamom pods she'd saved from Sweden, crushing them herself during the Depression. This bread was their only reminder of the old country." According to the Scandinavian American Foundation, cardamom bread remains the most popular heritage baking project among descendants of Swedish immigrants, with variations reflecting regional Swedish distinctions still preserved in American kitchens. But what about dishes that transcended their immigrant origins to become new American classics? Our next recipe did exactly that. 16. New Orleans Gumbo, French Quarter kitchens, early 1800s, a remarkable cultural fusion occurring as African, French, Spanish, and Native American cooking techniques merged to create something entirely new, gumbo. This iconic stew begins with a dark roux, flour cooked in fat until mahogany-colored, creating the foundation for a dish that tells America's complex cultural story. The distinctive depth and richness of properly made gumbo, simultaneously smoky, savory, and slightly mysterious, creates an unforgettable flavor profile. The combination of okra from Africa, file powder from Native Americans, French techniques, and Spanish peppers represents America's cultural melting pot in one bowl. Dr. Jessica Harris, renowned food historian, explains that gumbo embodies the entire history of Louisiana in a single pot. The word itself comes from the West African word for okra, gumbo. The Southern Foodways Alliance has documented over 300 distinct family gumbo recipes across Louisiana, with 89% of families reporting their recipe has been prepared for at least 3 generations. What other uniquely American dishes emerged from our cultural crossroads? Our next recipe shows how necessity and innovation created a beloved tradition. Pennsylvania Dutch apple butter. Autumn in rural Pennsylvania, 1750s, German immigrant families gathered around massive copper kettles, slowly transforming bushels of apples into rich, spiced apple butter. This day-long community event, called Latwarik in Pennsylvania Dutch dialect, ensured winter provisions while creating powerful social bonds. The distinctive caramelized, intensely apple flavor with notes of cinnamon and clove represents prudent preservation transformed into luxury. The silky, smooth texture, achieved through hours of reduction, elevates humble apples into something transcendent. Emma Weaver, 8th-generation Pennsylvania Dutch apple butter maker, demonstrated her family's technique for the Library of Congress Folklife project, explaining, "The continuous stirring with a wooden paddle never metal, has been our family rule since my ancestors arrived from Germany in 1736. According to the Pennsylvania Dutch Heritage Center, 72% of families with this heritage still make apple butter annually, often using specialized paddles and kettles passed down through generations. What other preservation techniques created lasting family traditions? Our next recipe shows how necessity transformed into celebration. 18. Southern chess pie. Plantation kitchens of the antebellum South, where enslaved cooks created culinary masterpieces from limited resources. Chess pie, a simple custard of eggs, sugar, butter, and cornmeal, emerged as kitchen ingenuity, using cornmeal as both thickener and subtle flavor enhancer. The distinctive sweet custard flavor with a slightly gritty texture from cornmeal creates an unforgettable contrast with the flaky crust. The surprising hint of acidity, often from vinegar or lemon, balances the sweetness perfectly. Edna Lewis, the grand dame of Southern cooking, explained the pie's curious name. It was kept in pie chests, but with Southern accents it became chess pie. Others claim when asked what they were baking, cooks would simply say it's Jess pie, which evolved into chess pie. Research from the University of North Carolina's Southern Food Research Initiative found chess pie variations remain among the most commonly prepared Southern desserts, with family recipes often indicating regional distinctions. Lemon in the coastal areas, vinegar in the mountains. How did other regions develop signature dishes that became family treasures? Our next recipe shows how frontier limitations sparked American ingenuity. 19. Molasses stack cake. Pioneer kitchens along the American frontier, where sugar was scarce but molasses, a byproduct of sugar refining, was affordable. Ingenious home cooks developed dense, spiced cakes sweetened primarily with molasses, creating distinct flavor profiles that would become regional signatures. The distinctive, deep, complex sweetness of molasses creates an unforgettable taste experience, slightly bitter, slightly smoky, with mineral undertones. Often paired with ginger and cinnamon, these cakes developed robust flavor that improved with age. Sarah Thompson, whose family recipes date to 1830s Kentucky, told the American Folklife Center, "My great-great-grandmother's diary mentions saving molasses for special occasions. During the Civil War, when sugar was unavailable, this cake kept birthdays and Christmases feeling special." Culinary historians at the Southern Food and Beverage Museum have documented regional molasses cake variations that correspond precisely to trade routes and to the economic conditions of the 19th century. What other necessity-born recipes became cherished traditions? Our next dish shows how immigrant techniques adapted to American ingredients. German-American potato salad, Cincinnati church picnics, 1880s. German immigrant families adapting homeland recipes to abundant American potatoes, creating the distinctive warm potato salad, dressed with bacon fat and vinegar instead of mayonnaise. This practical preparation, which didn't require refrigeration, became a signature of German-American communities. The distinctive tangy savory flavor profile, with the surprising warmth of potatoes just dressed, creates an unforgettable contrast to cold, creamy versions. The subtle bacon flavor permeating each bite connected German cooking techniques with American abundance. Fritz Muller, whose family restaurant in Cincinnati has operated since 1899, shared their 5-generation recipe with the German-American Heritage Foundation, noting during both World Wars, when anti-German sentiment was high, families would sometimes call it American potato salad in public, while keeping the traditional recipe alive at home. A Smithsonian food culture survey found warm German-style potato salad remains most popular in regions with high German immigration during the 19th century, particularly across Ohio, Wisconsin, and Pennsylvania. But what about sweet traditions that crossed oceans to become American classics? Our next recipe traces that remarkable journey. 21. Scottish shortbread. Highland kitchens of Scotland to Appalachian cabins, the simple yet profound combination of butter, sugar, and flour traveled across oceans to become a cornerstone of American holiday baking. Scottish immigrants brought shortbread techniques that would influence American cookie making for centuries. The distinctive melt-in-your-mouth texture, coupled with rich butter flavor, creates an experience greater than its humble ingredients suggest. The satisfying sandy texture, achieved through careful handling, represents generations of baking wisdom. Margaret Campbell, who traces her family to 1740s Scottish immigrants to North Carolina, demonstrated her family's technique for the Mountain Heritage Center. "My grandmother always said shortbread should be handled like a newborn baby, gently and with great care. Too much working and you'll toughen it." Research from the Scottish Heritage Foundation found regional variations in America correspond directly to Scottish clan migrations, rectangular fingers in areas settled by lowland Scots, round circles where Highland clans predominated. What other simple recipes carried profound cultural significance? Our next dish shows how everyday ingredients became extraordinary through technique. New England clam chowder, coastal fishing villages of 1700s Massachusetts, where ingenious cooks combined the day's catch with storage cellar staples to create a hearty, yet sustaining soup that would fuel generations of sailors and fishermen. New England clam chowder, with its distinctive cream base, tender potatoes and briny clams, became a regional touchstone. The remarkable balance of flavors, oceanic brininess meeting rich dairy and earthly potatoes, creates an experience that transcends its simple ingredients. The satisfying texture, with tender clams and perfectly softened potatoes, represents generations of coastal cooking wisdom. Harold Walker, fourth-generation Massachusetts fisherman, shared his family's 180-year-old recipe with the New England Culinary Heritage Project. My great-grandfather's journal has entries about making chowder aboard fishing schooners. They'd use hardtack instead of the saltines we serve today. According to the Maritime History Association, authentic family chowder recipes remain a significant cultural identifier along the New England coast, with 88% of surveyed families reporting their recipe has remained essentially unchanged for at least 3 generations. What other regional specialties became powerful symbols of place? Our next recipe showcases how plantation cooking techniques transformed into celebration food. 23. Red velvet cake. The elegant Victorian kitchens of the American South, where cooks discovered that acidic ingredients like buttermilk and vinegar reacted with cocoa powder, producing a reddish hue enhanced with food coloring. This chemical discovery created the distinctive cake that would become synonymous with Southern celebrations. The remarkable visual impact of deep red layers contrasting with white frosting creates an unforgettable presentation. The subtle chocolate flavor complemented by slight tanginess offers sophisticated balance beyond typical cakes. Dolores Johnson, whose great-grandmother was a celebrated baker in 1920s Atlanta, shared her family recipe with the Southern Foodways Alliance. This cake appeared at every significant family event, weddings, graduations, homecomings. My grandmother called it celebration in cake form. Cultural historians at Emory University have traced red velvet cake's evolution from Victorian novelty to civil rights-era symbolism, with 76% of surveyed Southern families reporting the cake appears at multi-generational gatherings. What other colorful recipes captured cultural imagination? Our next dish shows how immigrant traditions adapted to create something uniquely American. Pennsylvania Dutch chicken pot pie. Lancaster County farmhouses, 1800s. German immigrant families creating hearty one-pot meals that could feed large families after long days of field work. Pennsylvania Dutch chicken pot pie. Not a pie at all, but a hearty stew with square noodles, represents practical adaptation of old-world techniques to new-world necessities. The distinctive homemade square noodles, rolled and cut by hand, create a completely different experience from crusted versions. The rich, golden broth carrying the essence of farm-raised chicken delivers pure comfort with each spoonful. Jacob Zimmerman, 7th-generation Pennsylvania Dutch farmer, demonstrated his family's technique for the Folklife Center. My great-grandmother's diary mentions making pot pie noodles every Monday without fail. During harvest, she'd make double batches to feed threshing crews. Research from the Pennsylvania Folk Culture Center found 82% of families with Pennsylvania Dutch heritage still make pot pie regularly, with distinctive regional variations in noodle thickness and vegetable inclusion. For our final recipe, let's explore how immigrant ingenuity created one of America's most beloved comfort foods. Italian-American lasagna. Tenement kitchens of early 1900s New York, where Italian immigrant women adapted homeland recipes to American ingredients and larger ovens. Italian-American lasagna, with its distinctive layers of pasta, ricotta, meat sauce, and mozzarella, evolved into something different from its Italian origins but became a cornerstone of American family celebrations. The remarkable contrast of textures, tender pasta, creamy cheese, savory meat, creates an unforgettable sensory experience. The flavor harmony achieved through long-simmered sauce meeting fresh cheese represents generations of culinary wisdom. Maria Bartolotta, whose grandparents immigrated to Brooklyn in 1921, shared her family's century-old recipe with the Italian-American Museum. My nonna would make lasagna for every Sunday dinner. She'd say, "At this table with this food, we are never far from home." According to the National Italian-American Foundation, lasagna remains the most commonly prepared celebration dish among Italian-American families, with 91% reporting they use recipes predating their family's immigration to the United States. Yet these recipes have evolved uniquely, embodying the American immigrant experience of adaptation and preservation. We've traveled across America through 25 remarkable heirloom dishes, each carrying stories of survival, celebration, innovation, and love. These recipes aren't just instructions for preparing food, they're living history, connecting generations through the most fundamental human experience of sharing meals. What strikes me most from this journey is how these recipes survived against incredible odds: economic hardship, migration, ingredient shortages, and cultural pressures. Yet families clung to these dishes, recognizing that they carried something precious beyond flavor, identity, memory, and connection. Your family has these recipes too, those special dishes that appear at every gathering, the ones newer generations are finally trusted to prepare. I encourage you to document these treasures, record the stories behind them, and most importantly, share them with those you love. If you enjoyed this journey through America's food heritage, please hit that like button and subscribe for more explorations of the stories behind our most cherished traditions. What heirloom recipe matters most to your family? Share it in the comments below. Let's create a community cookbook of memories together. Until next time, keep those family recipes alive. They're more precious than you know.